Well, you know, it starts with marrying a Danish girl in 1967. I'm married here in Denmark. And then, you know, if my Danish relatives are sitting around talking Danish, then I can go to Copenhagen and see the sights. And so when I came to the Round Tower, you know, my PhD, my doctoral degree, is in history. But it wasn't so much the history. I'm fascinated with that too, but it was the aesthetics, especially inside the ramp, you know, the spiral ramp. In photography, in the old days when I took photography, they taught you some basic rules. Now you should look for leading lines, and so you have many leading lines. You know, nice curves. You should look for repeated patterns, and all of these things are represented, and good contrast between light and dark, and you know, and all of these things you have photographically inside the Round Tower. And then photographing the outside is always a challenge because mostly people are standing on the street trying to do it. So that's so then when I got the idea that I could go up on that, I've been on that patio over there on the building behind, you know, and I've been on all these towers. Yeah. And so as a object for photography, which is very, very interesting. I did my doctoral dissertation about women who started churches or religious movements in America. And one of these women came to Ronnetorn. She was living in Switzerland, working, and then she came to Copenhagen 3 times. And in 1886, she climbed Ronnetorn. So you get to the top of Ronnetorn. Now this is where the history gets interesting because, you know, as a historian, you always like to find out what the errors in history are. So they told her that when Peter the Great came, he went up Ronnetorn with the king. And they're standing at the top of Ronnetorn, and which of us has a soldier who would throw himself down from this tower if the king commanded it? And the Danish king says, I have no such soldiers, but I am not afraid to sleep in the house of the humblest subject of my kingdom. And so Erling Poulsen, you know, your archivist and astronomer, he tells me, that couldn't happen because we have a record of what happened when Peter the Great came and who went with him, and the king did not go with him. So that kind of thing is fun. And so anyway, a little history, a little architecture, a little photography. Yeah, yeah. But you keep on coming back every year. Yeah. Why is that? Well, you find new things. Now, like this year, I decided, I think I'll study the railing, the fence. And so when I told your director, Jesper, about it, you know, he showed me a whole article from the National Museum yearbook, you know, about this. Well, I couldn't read it all, but I could see it was. So my wife translates a little bit, and I just never thought before. When I look at the individual panels, you know, felts, you know, I look at the individual. I never thought before that, but what they were all symmetrical. This exactly the same on both sides. No, they're not. They were handmade. They're not going to be perfectly symmetrical. This curl comes all the way around. This curl only comes this far. Then when I get into it deeper, I discovered that panel number 2 and panel number, I think it's 40 and 42, are almost identical. I never noticed that before. Now I'm making a series of photographs where you will see the railing just in silhouette. Usually you're standing up, and when you take a picture of the railing, you see the city. But I go way down low and put my camera up like this, take a picture, so only the sky behind. And then in Photoshop, I straighten out the lines and make it all black and white. So now you have the equivalent of a drawing, but it's a silhouette. So it's fun like that. No, maybe next year I'll do something else. You know, I don't know. You know, there's always a little of the child left in us, and so it's always fun. I've been here with my son when he was just a little boy, and with my grandsons, they were little boys, and watching them run up and down and hide in the alcoves. You know, this is all fun. This is just fun. Thought of this myself. It was perfectly obvious, but I asked Erling, I said, what about building a tower and a scientific observatory and then connecting it with a church? Why would they do this, you know? And he said, well, you know, in the 17th century, it was all for the glory of God. People believed that nature and science was God's other book, and so the church, and I learned a little bit. I think I've learned more this year than in many years, because I took some time with your staff. You know? Yeah. On the portal, the entryway, to the upper left and the upper right, there are two birds. But when I think of a dove, I think of the white birds that they released at the Olympics, you know, and sometimes in America they do that at a funeral, they have all these white birds. And when I think of a pigeon, I think of these dirty birds that beg for food on the street. But anyway, whatever it is, it's very similar. So I said, well, okay, I'll look in the Bible and figure out see if I can find anything about a sleeping dove or a resting dove or a dead dove or a dead pigeon. And the only thing I could find was in the psalm where the psalmist says, oh, that I had the wings of a dove and I would fly away and be at rest. Oh, there's a dove and rest in the same idea. So what is that like? Well, then, you know, you can let your imagination, this is a nice thing about art and symbolism, imagination go, and you can say, well, you go from the busy Copenhagen, you come into the round tower, and now it's quiet, unless the kids are running, and it's white, and it's smooth, and you can ascend like a dove, restfully. And then, if it's the right evening, you can go into the observatory and ascend to the stars, and now you're like a resting dove. But there's some other theories, and they're probably better, about the king threatened by the Swedes and saying, I will die in my nest, and I will be resurrected like the phoenix bird, you know. Oh, you know, why do people collect anything? People get a hobby. They say, look at all. Well, and you know, it could have some significance, because this ephemera even could have some significance, because I think when people outside Denmark think of Copenhagen, they think of the Little Mermaid as kind of the artistic symbol. But when the kings of Denmark were trying to elevate the status of Denmark in the world community and tried to persuade other nations that Denmark was not just a nation of farmers, illiterate farmers, but we had science going on here and industry, and that they should pay attention to Denmark. It was Runderton and the observatory that they wanted to emphasize. So when Peter the Great comes here with his spies to look at everything, he himself goes to Runderton, you know. He can send his iron maker to the iron factory, but he goes to Runderton. So there's a way in which Runderton is a symbol of Copenhagen, and showing that it even ends up on a silly ice cream wrapper is part of showing its reputation and its symbolic significance in the popular culture. Get interested, or people with hobbies get interested in them, and it's hard to understand, and maybe they don't understand. But it's just interesting, and because I'm interested in this serious side, I'm interested in this other side.